goes against what I should ask you to do, or it goes against what I shouldn't ask you to do, I want you to pull out your phones. But you got to promise me, you're not going to do Facebook. You're not going to go to the 5 messages that you got while in worship. Just go to either your notes and create a new note, or maybe even go to your text messages and start a new text message to yourself, whichever one you prefer. But this is, as we reflect, it'll be used in this space, but I do hope it's something that you could actually look back to in the weeks to come, the months to come. So, phones out, no social media, no texting other people other than yourself. You can text yourself. And then we're going to spend a few minutes in reflection. And then we'll get into our passage for this morning. So first, I'm going to give about a few minutes for each of these. So take your time. Think, use your brain, but also ask God to highlight some of this stuff as you're thinking through it. Ask God to actually speak into this, and then just kind of write freely. Don't feel like what you're writing has to be perfect or you have all the words right. Just kind of write what's coming to you within those few minutes. So first of all, I have 3 questions. 1, and by the way, for some of you who have man, I have been a Christian for a long time, been following Jesus, all these things. Some of you might be I'm on this new journey. I'm trying to figure out faith. I'm trying to figure out Jesus. I don't really know. Even though these questions are kind of guided to already having life with Jesus, for those of you that might be trying to figure it out, I would encourage you to just kind of reframe it. And you'll hear them, but then think about it in a way as you're trying to discover. So first, what do you find attractive about Jesus? Second question. If you were telling someone about Jesus, how would you describe how you feel about him and what impact he has on your life right now? And last one, what would you say are the greatest areas of change in your life because of Jesus? Good. Again, you can spend a lot more time on those. 3 minutes, surprising enough, I did this recently, and I had a couple more questions even on the back end, and probably spend about 15 to 20 minutes on each. But I hope that this just kind of helps you pause to actually think about these things. Because I think in most of life, we don't oftentimes pause to actually check the pulse on things. How are certain things going? How have certain things impacted me? How am I hoping they're going to impact me? What are the things I want to kind of see happen in my future? And what are all the things kind of around me that are playing into these things? So this morning, as we just come out of that, considering our life with Jesus, I want us also to think about a couple thousand years ago, everyone who was around Jesus was kind of asking these same questions. Maybe a little bit more on the skeptic side, maybe a little bit more not asking after the fact, how has this changed my life? Because a couple thousand years ago, when Jesus comes on the scene, God in the flesh, everyone had ideas of who this prophesied Messiah was going to be. And for those who were culturally, ethnically Jewish, they would have hoped for someone to come and overthrow the Roman Empire because they were oppressed. They were actually oppressed by the Romans in so many ways that we can't even imagine. Their lives were essentially just a continuation of war in so many ways. And then for others, he was a threat. He came in and started teaching things and actually challenging both the Roman Empire but also the religious elite. And so he comes in and he starts threatening. And over again, no one can really figure out who he is. And what we're doing in this series that we're calling The Pursuit, Encountering a God Who, we're looking at the book of Luke. And for these 5 weeks, just looking at kind of God breaking into people's lives in pretty unexpected ways. And oftentimes what can happen is I think we can read these and we can look at them and say, wow, that was pretty crazy, or wow, that'd be great if that happened in my life, or I don't know if that still happens anymore. But man, look at this Jesus character. Look at what he's doing. And we kind of think about this as like a ethereal thing that happened a couple thousand years ago. And sometimes we can miss that Jesus is still breaking into our lives today. And so we're kind of confronted with questions by Luke. And maybe one of those questions is Jesus still breaking into my life today? And is that Jesus? Is that God? Like, how does that work? Or maybe another question is even like, do I want God breaking into my life? Am I creating space and asking for God to break into my life? And so through this lens, I want us to keep considering, how is God breaking into my life today? How am I praying and longing for God to break into my life today? And what are some of the unexpected ways that I might be surprised by how God is breaking into my life today, or will break into my life today? So this morning, Luke 8:26-31. They had just got done doing some other ministry. They cross over the lake, the sea, to another side of land, into what would be kind of non-Jewish territory, or Gentiles, those who are outside of life with God. They sailed to this region of the Gerasenes, which is across from the lake from Galilee. This is Luke 8. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. You run into any demons as of late? For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had just commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept underground, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him, and they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. What the heck? My question all week long. What do I even do with this? How do we actually start to even think wait, hold on. There was a demon-possessed man who's just out there in the tombs naked, running around. Other accounts have him cutting himself, different things. Townspeople were shackling him and chaining him up. How in the world does this actually connect with my life today? How does this connect to our lives as a church? And what's this mean for discipleship to Jesus and the things that we're hoping for? And if we pause for a second and kind of think back through who this man is and what's going on, there was a couple highlighting points there. One, it said that he was no longer in the city with people. We see a man who has been isolated from community, who has been ostracized, who is on the outside looking in, who is no longer welcome. He is naked without a home. He has been degraded to living similar to the animals. He's living in the tombs, which were thought to be, this is where demonic, spiritual haunting happened. Many of those were outcasted, but also many of those who were dead. He might as well already be dead. Chained and unchained. We see the townspeople chain him, he breaks free, he moves on, but it says that he is still captured by the demonic. So whether he has chains or not, he is still imprisoned by a demon. And then the demons even answer on his behalf when Jesus says, "What is your name?" The things that have consumed him, the things that have overwhelmed him, have actually taken his identity and are responding now for him. He has lost all of himself. He is completely gone. He is being controlled by something completely different. C.S. Lewis writes a little bit on these kind of accounts, and in summation, he says, we tend to do two things. One, with demons and demonology and all the accounts of Jesus casting things out, one, we tend to give them too much attention. Where we give it so much attention and we try to break it all down and we do all the things to put it in the highest place. Or two, we try to completely write it off. And we justify like, oh, well, they didn't have modern medicine and they didn't really know what was going on in the brain and how that connected with thought. And we try to do one or the other. And C.S. Lewis says, can we refrain from both? Can we actually take these as they're written, especially from Luke, who is a Greek physician? So Luke writing this is someone who actually understands at most at that point how the body and the things that are working. So in this, my temptation is to try and work through like, well, now we got to talk about demons and what is this and how does this work and all these different things. But I think that actually falls into one of the things that C.S. Lewis is saying we should refrain from. Because I think what's happening here on a greater level, if we actually think about this demon, what we're talking about is evil. And for us, if we're saying we follow the ways of Jesus, that we look to God for the life that we have, we're also claiming that we are not just metaphysical beings, that we're not just physical and DNA structures and we have minds and different things. We're actually saying that we are spiritual beings, that there's actually a reality around us that can't always be seen or felt. Jesus comes on the scene shortly before this, and in the temples he had said, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Jesus just shortly before this said, I am coming here to establish my kingdom. I'm coming here to establish the reign and the rule and the activity of God here on earth. He is establishing a spiritual reality that is breaking into the present. If we believe in that reality, do we also believe that there is an opposing force that he is actually overcoming? That there's an opposing force that is saying, I do not want the goodness of God to continue to move in the lives of people. Small question. We probably won't answer it today, or you may not answer it today. But if we see one reality, do we see the other? I know for me, I usually do not see the other. Like 99.9% of the time. Right? I usually operate in what I can see, what I can feel, what I can control, all the things. Over and over again. Even in my prayer life. I think I oftentimes mostly am praying, believing in the spiritual reality of God breaking in, but I'm not praying as much against the opposing spirituality that Jesus talks about over and over and over again. And I wonder how much similarity or difference there is for you in that. As you continue to live your life with Jesus, do we recognize evil? I think is ultimately what we're talking about here. Now, for me, my generation, you guys seen Blair Witch Project? Growing up is that's some evil. Or The Shining, maybe a little bit before that. Some Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You just go through all the things, right? These are some of the realities that are actually I know, I'm trying. I'm doing my best. I'll do better. But these are the things that probably form most. They okay? Steven, you got eyes? Don't worry, we had 5 parents go, so we're good. They got it. Okay. And if it's yours, someone's got it. But these are the things that probably shaped most of this imagination around evil. Or it's things that have conquered the world in the sense of what we're seeing with Russia and Ukraine right now. We see war. We think about the genocide of Native Americans. We think about the transatlantic slave trade. You keep going. I think about evil, that's Hitler, that's Stalin. We have these big, far things out here that probably shape our idea of what evil looks like. And in that sense, it's oftentimes easy to push off as that is not actually a part of my life. Those things don't really play into my day-to-day. Those are those big things out there of this opposing force and evil. But I wonder if we were to look at this man's life, if we were to look at the things that I just named, the isolation and living like an animal and all the different things that are going on here, I wonder if evil is actually closer to us than we think. And I wonder if evil is inside of us more than we think. And I wonder if we're aware or willing to be aware of those things. In the New Testament, they shift. When I think about the demon-possessed man, when I think about exorcisms, when I think about all these different things, and we can think about them being so far off, we can see a lot of these physical reactions. What ends up happening in the New Testament in John 8 actually says Jesus calls the enemy the father of all lies. That becomes the enemy's coin. Essentially, in and through Jesus, the enemy, man, this is fun stuff. We're talking spiritual things today. The enemy has lost his power to conquer, to rule, to reign, all these different things. But he can still lie. The father of all lies, the going all the way back to the garden, deception. He can actually tease things out to kind of hold it in front of us to say, hey, this is actually what you want. This is actually what you should do. This is actually what you should believe about yourself. This is all these different things. So let me ask you this. We think about this demon-possessed man who is consumed with all of this. What consumes you? This morning, what consumes you? Because if you're anything like me, when I think about this reality of who we would call the enemy, the opposing force to God's kingdom, to what Jesus is up to, I wonder how much he consumes our mind with insecurities and fears and worries and anxieties. I wonder how much he actually starts to determine our hope in things and starts to tell us that that is not true. You cannot do this. This will never happen. And he actually interjects despair and just shades of gray over our life. Or maybe the base impulses of our behavior that we should live more and more into, where we're driven more by hatred and greed and lust and resentment. Maybe it's our sense of freedom. It's past hurts and losses and grievances that are defining who we are today. It's the past mistakes that we've made that we can never actually remove from, and we're identified by the things that we've done bad or wrong. It's the addiction or the behavior that you cannot break that's actually defining you, and for that, you aren't worthy. More and more kind of boiled down to one way of looking at things, saying that you are identified by your sexuality, that you are identified by your politics, that you are identified by the things that you can achieve or the things that you can do. You just feel that in your lives, day in and day out. When I walk into a room, there's things just going on in my head and my mind and my heart. And on a good day, man, I'm present and I am confident and I see people. On a bad day, I am insecure, I am fearful. And you just kind of keep going down the list. How much of that is actually the reality of present evil? Because what we see here again, if we think back to this man who was isolated, that had lost all essentials of human dignity, that was haunted and just might as well be at the end of things, there's no hope. No matter what he's free from or not doing or doing, he's still just bound to the things that are controlling him, and that all the other things are actually speaking on his behalf for who he is. And I think what starts to happen is we start to operate differently when we actually take this stuff on. So even a list like this: overworking, staying busy, focusing only on the needs of your children, constantly saying I'm fine, substance use, throwing oneself into advocacy, cutting yourself off from certain family and friends, seeking constant distraction, avoiding certain places, apathy, emotional eating, giving up. You can keep going and going and going. Right now, through the pandemic, what's happening more and more and more is that behavioralists are actually saying that over 40% of people at this point could be diagnosed with like actual diagnosis around anxiety, like prominent diagnosis, not like I have some anxiety in my life. No, like diagnosed to like have medication with anxiety, with depression. For these last couple years, more and more and more, we knew this in the early days. People started medicating through what they were viewing on their websites, what they were picking up from the liquor store, and what they could get over the counter, and who they could actually abuse in their home. That actually, like an uptick in all of those things after a few months in COVID. Guess what? Most of that has not slowed down. Those things are still up. And how much of this has been a space of isolation where the enemy can actually speak to us in these lonely ways that we actually start to believe and take on. And then we start to operate differently, and it starts to look like things like this. And again, this list is massive. These are the ways we try to like modify and have behaviors that overcome the things that we're feeling inside. And if I read this again, when we hear Jesus, he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year over the Lord's favor." After this little series of miracles that he does, and he works through this demon-possessed man, he works through a sick woman, he works through a dead girl, he does these things. What does he eventually do? He then sends the group of people, about 72 of them, to go and then do these same things. To go and actually have authority over the demons. To actually see these things that Jesus has started to then live out. And a list like this seems counter to what Jesus is calling us to. Because these pull me inward. These pull me away from people. These keep me in the house. These keep me not from speaking. These just keep going over and over again. And I think the enemy loves this. There's some line somewhere like, if the enemy can't do this, he can make you busy. Like that kind of thought. Like there are things inside of us that are playing around us that if we don't actually open up to, I wonder if we're fulfilling all that God actually has for us. I wonder if we're discovering the potential of actually living a life of freedom that is guided by the Spirit. So I would ask this morning, which ways might you be soothing? Which ways might you be kind of medicating these realities, the overwhelm, the things in which the enemy is trying to just rob from you? Which ways are you soothing? And if there's soothing happening, is that leading to restoration? Because see, I think one thing we pick up here, at least one thing, is that God is a God who soothes. God is a God that in times of overwhelm and stress and losing our identity and being outcast from society, all these different things, he actually, in his great mercy, meets people where they are. But he doesn't just soothe to soothe, he soothes for the sake of restoration. See, what we see here as we go on, a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go to the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pig, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. A lot of nuances here, but one, Jesus just removed a demon from a man, sent them into the pigs, and all the pigs went down. A couple things happening here. One, we just got off of Jesus calming a storm, just before this. And when everyone was asking, who is this man, Jesus actually exercises his power and authority over nature. In the big storm, and they're on the boat, and Jesus is sleeping, and everyone's freaking out. The sea was a place of death, of terror, of the unknown, of the abyss. And Jesus calms the unknown. He calms the chaos. He exerts his power over nature. And then here, over the pigs and the demon, he actually shows his power over demons and death. that he actually has power over the rule of the enemy, the rule of the lies. And he actually has power over the Roman Empire. If we put the pigs together and what that represented, the Roman Empire actually used pigs as one of their monikers. Legion, when he said, "My name is Legion," a legion is actually a Roman military unit of 3,000 to 6,000 military men. He just exercises power over the oppressors to the people. But he also puts it over evil and death. Essentially, Jesus is flexing in this moment. Yet, everyone is still like, who is this man? Who is this man? When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside. And the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Well, I thought they were afraid when he was out of his mind, but he's in his right mind, he's clothed, they're afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, because they were overcome with fear. So he got in the boat, and he left. I don't want us to overlook the compassion and the mercy of God in this moment. We've been using God and Jesus interchangeably for a purpose. But where God actually goes to the places where those that are outcasts of society, and he soothes their soul. He brings them back to right mind. He brings them back to being clothed. He restores dignity even to a point where he could sit at Jesus' feet. He soothes the soul so that he could invite into relationship, not to isolate. Invite into relationship to speak identity and truth and worth and dignity over, where the rest of the evil is speaking the opposite. And it's by the compassion and the mercy of God. He is a God that is wanting to soothe our souls, but it's not just for the sake of soothing, it's for the sake of restoration. Picking up in 38, the man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him. So he's restored, he's clothed, he's at the feet of Jesus. Jesus then leaves because everyone is freaking out and they're afraid of what he just did. He'd gone out and Jesus sent him away. He begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him. See, again, I think that a part of this is that God is wanting to soothe our souls, but not just for the sake of soothing and making us feel good, but for the sake of restoration. And what restoration starts to look like here is actually connection with other people. What restoration starts to look like is not just that I've been restored, but then other people get to hear the good news of the restoration that has occurred in my life. And Jesus says this, notice, return home and tell how much God has done for you. But didn't Jesus just do the thing? And they're watching, and then they hear, wait, God, how does this? And more they're asking, who is this man? Who is this man? How does he do this? How can he proclaim that God has done this? And it's this moment where Luke confronts us with a question. He takes the townspeople and he takes this demon-possessed man and he pins them against themselves. And he turns to us as the readers and says, what will you do? When Jesus actually enters into your life, in you, around you, wherever it is, when he's breaking into our lives, will we push him away and ask him to leave and remain terrified? Will we sit at his feet and beg to go with him? To then be given the purpose that he's intended for us, to carry on the establishing of his kingdom, the mission that he is on, that he invites us into. The people were terrified, and they asked him to leave when this man's life was restored. But the one that sits at his feet begs to go with them, because the one who sat at his feet has actually encountered God. And he's received the mercy and the compassion of God, not just for the sake of soothing his soul to release the things, but to restore him to community, to restore him to a mission that is beyond his own story, to proclaim the good news. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, and set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And we can read stories like this and think that evil is so far out there, and these are these removed things, and they're too big. They don't happen in our daily life. But I guarantee you, evil is closer to us than we know. And the lies are to keep us from the mission that Jesus declares here in Luke 4. The question again is, what will we do? What will you do? We're going to move into ministry time in here a second. But I just want us to consider this. Maybe we take note from this demon-possessed man. Are you inviting Jesus into the challenges of your life? The overwhelm, the challenge, the lies, the things that are bombarding you, the things that are trying to push you in certain directions, the things that are begging you to certain directions. Are you actually inviting Jesus into that? And one of the things, Jesus gave a prayer to his disciples at one point. It was common for teachers that day to give the men that were following them prayers. And we know this is the Lord's Prayer. If you grew up especially in Catholicism or anywhere else, you know it. And in the Lord's Prayer, what does it say? What does it say about evil? Anybody know? Deliver us from evil. Deliver me from evil. Deliver me from the things that are trying to keep me from all that God has for me. Deliver me from this spiritual realm that I so don't want to ever think is actually there. But it is more than we probably will ever know. And that prayer was a daily prayer. Deliver me from the evil one. Over and over and over. Are we actually inviting Jesus into the challenges? 2, are you sitting at the feet of Jesus? This can look 1,000 different ways. But are we actually taking time to maybe even just sit with a passage of Jesus and just let it speak to us? Not just mine for information in the scriptures, but to actually sit. To be quiet and to let him speak or not speak, just to be in the presence. Are we creating space? And that's not just an isolated thing, that's in community. That's with other people. That's in home to home. It's praying with one another and reading scripture and laughing and crying and reading a book. I mean, there's so many different ways. But are we actually committed to community with other people? I always appreciate Andrew. Whenever Caitlin's out of town for a few days, Andrew will shoot me a text and say, hey, how you doing, man? Because he knows that in the times of isolation, the lies get louder. The times when I am alone, the lies get louder, and then behaviors change. And he always checks in, a couple days in, hey, man, how's it going? I know the feeling. How are you doing? Like that's community. To draw those things out into the light. Take the demon-possessed man from the tombs into the town, to be connected. And then lastly, going back to the first reflection we did, are you sharing how much God has done for you? Because again, it's not just soothing for the sake of ourselves, where we find community and we're sitting at the feet of Jesus and those kind of things, but it's actually for the sake of mission. It's for the sake of restoration. Are we serving? Are we connecting with people, especially those that are different than us? Are we praying for people? Are we just sharing our story, not in some weird, aggressive, demanding way and trying to change other people? But are we sharing about the mercy of God and what he's done for us? Are we sharing about the compassion of Jesus and how he's changed our life? Can we continue to be people that share how much God has done for us? lastly, Ish, why don't I invite you up, is this, that in all of this, I guess if we hear one thing, that Jesus in this story is declaring his rule and reign. He's actually declared that his mercy is greater than anything you think combats it. Anything that makes you want to run from it, anything that keeps you from pressing into it. He has overcome the world, it says in John 16. And for that, we might actually have peace. Because here's the deal. This is the tension. With the demon-possessed man, it's not like we see every single person just freed from this. I know we'd like to think that. And this is where theology matters. Jesus' kingdom has broken in. And we will actually have access to things for him to work in our lives through his Spirit in and through us. But do we believe that he will one day come again, and that is when all things are restored? And how does that hope, how does thinking about 1,000 years from now actually change the way we operate today? How does it actually change that we believe that God's mercies are enough even when we feel like we are not enough? And we continue to stay open to say, God, just more of your mercy. God, more of your mercy. I don't know about this. I don't know about this. I'm feeling this. Whatever it is, just more of your mercy. And may he respond. Probably usually different than the way we want or think. But God in this story is declaring his victory. And what was to come through his death and resurrection. And may that propel us to receive that mercy, to receive that compassion.